We may start. Thank you all for coming. I'm really happy to see that so many people came here tonight to see the movies and to hear our discussion. And I'm even more pleased and honored to have our guest here tonight and to welcome him. Please, maybe we can have one more applause. This is Majd Nasrallah from Kavan. Thank you. So it is hard to have a talk after such touching and hard movies, but well, we will do our best. When you see these movies, and from the last one, which is basically a story of brutal human humiliation, to from the first one about the life in refugee camps in Lebanon. The first thing which is striking, at least for me, the first movie is made in '74, if I'm right, and what we see there, it's refugees, it's bombing of the camps, it's the Western weapons supporting the Israel, it's efforts of resistance. So it seems like not much has changed. It's the movie is disturbingly familiar to the scenes. Basically, I mean, the technology have changed. 50 years have passed, but for me, the first thought was this is so disturbingly familiar. So, was that also your impression? And the second question is, how is, if you would need to summarize, I know it's probably extremely hard, but how is to belong to a community and a nation that has been for 76 years negated, tried to be erased, expelled from its homeland, repressed?
Okay, we begin with some technical issues, that's fine. Okay. Thank you, Jerko, for this introduction, and thank you for all of the organizers of this event. It is my honor to be amongst you tonight and to start a conversation. I think I'm more interested in exchanging this conversation than just kind of sitting here and speaking to an audience. But allow me, please, before we start, just to stand in a minute of silence to the 41,000 souls that have been martyred in the last 200 days, but also to all the martyred souls since the last 100 years. You know, I'm really not okay. You know, I came here with a certain kind of energy to be able to, you know, communicate with you and perhaps relay some truths. Can we fix this a little bit? Can we fix the speaker a little bit? It's kind of, yeah, it's hard. It was really hard to, I wasn't really expecting to sit here and be this moved by these films that I haven't seen for the first time. But one thing kept replaying in my head as we're sitting here watching this happen 50 years ago now. It's happening right now. You know, this isn't a strange sight. And so there was this kind of just dystopic kind of moment in which you know, it just, something felt off, you know, because I'm, you know, I'm meant to come here and speak about how important these platforms are and how important, you know, it is to kind of, for audiences to be exposed and to engage with this kind of content, you know, and how blessed it is to actually have such spaces that allow us to even just receive it, right? But there was something so destructively harmful inside, because once again, you know, you look at these films and it's been the same. It's literally been the same scenes, the same kind of oppressive reality, the same violations, the same agony, the same suffering for all these years. And yet, you know, the best we can do as Palestinians is show it to you, right? This becomes an encapsulation of the best we can do, to utilize these mediums to show you our suffering. And we've been doing that over and over and over and over again. And yet we still find ourselves in a position where I have to kind of still sit here, maybe not in front of this audience, but to the international arena, and try to prove to you that we're oppressed, to prove to you that we're violated, to prove to you the suffering. And it just, it breaks my heart, honestly. You know, I had a different plan to start this evening, but, you know, seeing all of this, it's like, how much of a breath can we spare to put our suffering on screens and in music and in exhibitions and just utilizing all these mediums of the art before it becomes just worthless? You know, how much of the content do we have to see come out of Gazi? And to just consume it and consume it and consume it, so it just becomes another, you know, another reminder of a wide-scale atrocity happening, as if in some distinct, you know, distant part of the world, with a population that we can, you know, associate with, but not. I don't know. Like sitting, you know, just watching this, kind of like, there's something that struck me about what am I meant to do? You know, like, what is it that Palestinians are meant to do? And I think one of the most catching moments in the last film was in the last scene, you know, and it kind of really drew a picture of the suffering, right? Which was, you know, when the guy was banging his hands on the table. And it was in that moment that I could hear so many voices say, oh, but like, you need to calm down. Or you're gonna get shot. Oh, but you know, like, you knew this was coming. And you know, so if he got shot, it was his reaction that was the problem. And not everything we saw in the film, you know, but he has a little girl, he should have calmed down, right? And it just comes to show you this constant kind of putting us on a pedestal of, but your reaction is what matters, not everything that you go through, you know? And I think we spoke about this briefly earlier. You know, I wanted to start tonight with something kind of just an offshoot, right? I wanted to sit here and begin with, you know what, fuck Hamas, right? There's all these voices. I saw this sticker, and it's like, I just wanted to lay just the foundational framework that I refuse to be dragged into the corner and dragged into an arena where I have to legitimize my suffering in this binary of a question of, do you condemn Hamas? As the first question I get to address the atrocity, to address what's going on. And so I just wanted to get that out of the way and just let you know, I will not be answering that question. I will not be taken into that arena. I really won't. And the idea is not because I fear anything, it's just because I understand the manipulative paradigm in which it is framed. Let's just begin with the fact that I think it's even worse than a genocide. I don't think international law has developed yet a language that is able to encapsulate the suffering of the Palestinian population. I really don't. I mean, not only is this framework of international law and the discourse of human rights been the same jail that has kept hostage our entire struggle for liberation. But you know, how can you begin to talk about genocide without talking about ethnic cleansing? without talking about apartheid, without talking about military occupation, without talking about the legacy of colonialism in the region. And so, you know, I don't even want to get caught up with what terminology is right now, you know, and I find it very deductive and very reductive of the human nature of my existence. And I'm here just to repeat one thing. If you know, if people have failed to realize it or feel threatened by it, the Palestinian cause is one of liberation. It's a just cause. It's a cause for an emancipation of a population that has been stripped, as we've seen, of its basic dignity, right? You know, I realize, perhaps I'm going out of the context of the question right now, but maybe just to open up the conversation for, you know, I realize that in today's world and age, especially with everything going on, there's this kind of formulation of what is going on, right? And there's all this effort to make it seem as though, you know, it's too complicated, or, you know, this is something that, you know, I won't speak on it immediately, you know, especially within, you know, this concept of, you know, Hamas, do you condemn Hamas? And immediately people feel kind of disassociated to this reality, and I don't want to, you know, speak on something that I don't know, or, you know, there's this convolution of if anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And, you know, I urge everyone here, I really urge everyone here to be brave, because you're not this, by remaining quiet in this given context, you're actually legitimizing the argument. You're legitimizing the argument that if you are critical of everything you're seeing on television, everything you're seeing on social media, and you're kind of standing up and ushering of a humane discourse, you're legitimizing literally the annihilation and extermination of an entire population. So please, I ask you to be brave, and I emphasize the fact that there's nothing to fear here. There's nothing threatening about standing up to human rights and just voicing it. I think this is one of the, just a first pillar of a message that I would like to deliver.
Well, now you opened like 200 different questions, but one thing I missed at the beginning was basically to introduce you. Majd is a cultural practitioner, curator, community organizer, originally from Kalansava. It's a city in what is today the internationally recognized borders of Israel, the Palestinian area known as a triangle. And since the last couple of years, you are living in Ramallah, if I'm right, in the occupied West Bank, working as a curator for the Katan Foundation. Basically, and what we hear, we'll come back to some of the topics you were touching now, but for the beginning, we hear most of the attention in international media is basically focused on West Bank and Gaza, and we'll come, these are extremely important topics, we'll come to that later, but first, can you tell us something about your experience and life of Palestinians inside Israel, because as you said, me and you were speaking extensively yesterday, and so a lot of images and narrative we see in the media all around the world, like the Arabs in Israel are integrated, they are equal, everything is basically fine. And well, how would you comment on that?
I mean, you said it opens up 200 questions. This opens up 200 answers. But I'll pick up where I left off about, you know, this idea that a lot of the discourse that's kind of given to you is that this is a complex issue. It's not. It's a very black and white issue. There's an oppressor, there's an oppressed. Now, the only thing that's complex is the matrix of oppression that is used by one hegemon, one dominant force, to exert its dominance over an entire population that doesn't fit the description of the ethno-religious character of what a state is. And so to achieve, to be able to kind of maintain this kind of oppression, to use the using different strategies and different tactics and tools to enforce it. And I'm not sure, perhaps many of you are familiar with these backgrounds, but maybe I'll just give a quick rundown. This matrix of oppression, as I call it, is divided upon two major things to understand. One is geography and the other is legal status, right? And so when the State of Israel was founded in 1949, it was very clear that there needs to be a certain distinction between the population of Palestinians. And the very basic nature of that is how can you fragment communities, and so they're so consumed by their immediate micro struggles and their immediate micro needs, but to also in such a subtle way to prevent any national unifying liberation project among Palestinians. And so in this context today there is 4 or 5 different categorizations of Palestinian communities. So there are almost 2.8 million in the West Bank, and those are stateless, citizenless, stateless population. There's also those in Gazi, and there's East Jerusalem, as well as Julan. Those are considered residents or temporary residents in the state, so they don't enjoy the, a spectrum of rights provided to citizens. There's obviously the exiled refugees, not only around the world, but in refugee camps in the West Bank itself. And then there's what is called the forgotten Palestinians, which are the Palestinians that remained in what is today called or considered Israel. This is a community that was left behind, and as defined by big figures like Ben Gurion or Menachem Begin, to be a tokenized, a tokenized identity, right? And tokenized in many different senses. One, to answer back to what you said about this facade or this mirage of an Israeli a democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, this oxymoron of a Jewish democratic state, right? And just to give a brief background about what this community is, in 1949, there was almost 250,000 Palestinians left from the 750,000 that were exiled. And this population, it was very apparent for the Israeli regime that they need to be tamed, that they need to be broken down, and so that they don't cause a threat, an internal threat to the state. And so the origins of this kind of taming or this kind of social engineering of a political identity for my community started immediately after 49. So from 49 until 1966, we were placed under martial law. And there was many aspects about martial law that are important to note. The first is this attack on the psyche of the Palestinian human, right? And in this case, we're talking about restriction of movement. So all of the towns that were there were restricted in terms of how they leave the town to go to their farmland and how they come back. And so we see basic things like calorie count that was occurring, right? So for example, and I mentioned this, my father, who was raised in martial law, told me the first time he tasted sugar, he was 16 years old. And it was under these very dire circumstances in the first 20 years that this engineered approach to how you break down a society psychologically, with food being one of them, movement being another, but also this fragmentation between the Palestinian and his land, right? So right after 49, the Jewish National Fund, which was the first entity to regulate land in Palestine, took more than 79% of lands that was privately owned by the citizens, by the indigenous population that remained. And what that did was it cut off the very basic relationship that existed between a Palestinian as a farmer, someone that lives off of his land, and immediately creating this urgency of livelihood. And the only way you can survive, because survival was the modus operandi at the time, was to go work for Israel, right? Be it manual labor or whatever it may be. And so it was at the era where we began to see the enforcement of certain policies, like the sticks and carrots approach. And the basic emphasis of the sticks and carrots approach was, if you are going to talk about Palestinianness, either in your art or your books or in public, etc., you get the stick. And the stick meant you're exiled, you're tortured, you're imprisoned, and so on and so forth. But if you assimilate to the Israeli society, you get the carrot. You run after a carrot, right? And assimilation in this sense meant that you had to be stripped of all of your political identity of being Palestinian. And these people that co-optated or assimilated were given certain statures in different places, be it municipalities, be it schools, high schools, etc. And it was also under martial law, where there was this extreme censorship and extreme attack by the Israeli intelligence on creating distrust amongst the community and creating this new character of, you never know who you speak to, and so you're always very afraid because this person might be working as an undercover for the Israeli intelligence. And this had repercussions up until today. But another major kind of signifier, or another trajectory shift, so after '66 we're naturalized as Israeli citizens. But the major trajectory shift actually occurred in 1993 when the Oslo Accords were signed. Because that was it was kind of the last nail in the coffin of our Palestinianness, of our Palestinian identity. Because if you look at the entire Accords, entire Oslo Accords, there's zero mention of the Palestinian community inside. And we call it 48, so the Palestinians in 48. And there was very little mentions of the refugees either. So immediately we are now legally subtracted from the equation of what Palestinian self-determination looks like, and what and how we're completely also cut off from Palestinian decision making, right? And immediately the first reaction of that was we begin to see in 1993 the first national voices to come to the arena, to the political arena, and there started to be this work on creating the Palestinian identity once again. And mind you, something very important that also coins or puts in perspective this kind of psychological social engineering of a community was the use of terminology. And so, as you said, we're branded or tagged as Israeli Arabs, right, or Arab Israelis, and which is kind of a very, very confusing concept. What does it mean to be an Arab Israeli, right? What is it, not only this disconnect, but as we've seen, a large population of the Israeli society actually comes, or they're called Mizrahis. They come from Morocco, they come from Iraq, they come from Yemen, etc. And so this convolution of what a political identity seems like can be seen through this lens of the brand that we're tagged with, an Arab Israeli. And when the nuance of this term is also seen in the way we perceive our political presence, right? So we have come to believe, to internalize the fact that we live in privilege. You're privileged. Look at the Arabs in Syria. Look at the Arabs in other places of the world, and we exist in what is considered the glass house paradigm, right? And so if you live in a glass house, you don't throw stones. Immediately there was this kind of like implanting of this notion that we are fragile. We are, at any moment we can be targeted, at any moment we can be, vilified, at any moment we can be, and that was a very, very, very ingenious way because of the power that we actually have as Palestinians in 48, the power we have to be within the belly of the beast, if you may. And these kinds of policies, you know, which are enshrined in at least 62 laws, basic laws in Israel that discriminate against the Palestinian identity.
Is a bit with a few examples, apart from those you already mentioned.
Okay. So, if I were to kind of just try to draw some mosaic of these laws, the first is land expropriation. So land expropriation since the 50s was one of the major things that was necessary to create urban spaces, not for Arabs, but for the Jewish community, right? And so Kalansawa, my hometown, is a place that before 1948 had 32,000 dunums, private-owned property. In 1947, 48, 49, it was reclused to 7,000 plus dunums, right?
Dunum is a measure for the land area.
Measure for land, so it's 1,000 meters squared, I think. Yeah. And from there we begin to see this, when we talk about land grabs, when we talk about land expropriation, we go back to this relationship to the land, but more importantly, we start looking, or we start understanding the kind of urban environment that they want us to exist in, right? An environment that, you know, quickly and rapidly begins to look like a ghettoized reality, a ghetto in which your life becomes so consumed by this jungle politics that you have no kind of space to consider anything else, you know. Now, the continuation of such policy is also seen in like the priority areas. And so there's a law that says that Israel will invest money in priority areas that, you know, that suit the Jewish character. Again, and for those who don't know, there is no constitution in Israel. There's the Declaration of Independence, and then there's the basic laws. And in the Declaration of Independence, it enshrines the collective character of the Jewish community, right? And everyone else that is non-Jewish, as it's described, non-Jewish, is given individual rights. You know, you get, you know, your economic, civil rights. And, you know, this is the waiver. You know, we are a democracy, you see. Even if we're Jewish, but, you know, other people also get to enjoy rights. As if we dropped out of the sky, you know, not being there as an indigenous population for generations and millennia. No, but with that being said, so you begin to see this disparity. The reason I mentioned the priority areas is to jump into the disparity of spending, of budget spending. Mind you, we are supposed to be, you know, regular citizens. I mean, we're clearly second or even third class citizens. That pay taxes just like everyone else does. And so our taxes are going to build priority areas, settlements on lands that are originally ours. So Kalansawa has 3 settlements on its previous land. And we see the development of entire urban projects to house, you know, young couples and whatnot. Meanwhile, there's more laws attached to this land in which, to go back to Kalansawa, of the 7,000 dunums that we remained on, we only had 3,000 designated for urban development. Now, this is in 1948, when the residents of Kalansawa were 2,500. Today, there are 26,000, and we still exist on 3,000 dunums. And so, what ends up happening is not only their development on our lands, in Jewish settlements, because of laws that give prevalence to state funding for that collective, but we also see vicious attacks of house demolitions on the other designated agricultural land that can never be transformed into part of the urban infrastructure. And so you see this other laws that come in, like the Kemenetz law, which basically says that any, you know, a judge is able to designate certain places that, you know, this house is built illegally, but you can't get a permit. Clearly, there's nowhere else to go. You're building on your private land that will never be part of the urban again, and you're immediately attacked by, you know, house demolitions. And for example, in 2017. More than 900 security forces invaded Kalansawa and destroyed 11 houses in a row. And I use the word invaded because if you go back to Bibi Netanyahu's Twitter post, he literally brags. He says, you know, today we sent 900 of our security forces, we invaded Kalansawa, and we destroyed these illegal structures, right? And there was all these like trolls about, we didn't know Kalansawa was a state, you know, like, you know, we didn't know that we're in the center of the state, right? Nevertheless, so there's all these things about lands and housing, but another major kind of pillar or another arena to consider is that of education and culture. And those are the very major kinds of powerhouses that were attacked by the state, not only in terms of being underfunded, so we're talking that a Jewish student will get 5 times state budget than an Arab student, right? But not only that, they were attacked as places for the formulation of identity. So one of the major classes you take in high school or in class in general is called Madaniyat, or civil life. And in the civil life, you're being taught about the Jewish right of return, you're being taught about the Jewish self-determination, and you're also constantly being reminded of the other, and the other which is the enemy, right? But you are the other. You're not, you know, so you're constantly you're internalizing this form of otherness and inferiority for many stages of your life. And I mean, these laws go on and on, you know, about family reunification. I can't marry someone from Libya or Yemen or any of the Arab states. But you know what, forget those. I can't marry someone from the West Bank and create a family with. And the West Bank is 1 kilometer across from Kalansawa, literally. It's 1 kilometer across. And I can't marry someone, and there's 60,000 families that are facing reunification issues. And you know, reunification means I can't naturalize my wife or my husband from the West Bank to get citizenship. And so you have to constantly exist in this kind of race of temporary residency, and this constant kind of burden of are my kids going to get the rights, social rights, you know, medical rights, and so on and so forth. And these laws go on, you know, like I can send you, or you know, if you go to this website, adala.com or .org, there's a listing of all these 62 laws that in their nature discriminate against this population. So this is just a general overview. Maybe I'll just end with the last trajectory in which we can talk about the current environment if that's relevant. But so from 1993, as I said, when we were turned into an Israeli domestic fair, and this new kind of work began to happen on, you know, creating a national Palestinian identity to the youth then, 7 or 8 years later, in the second intifada, we see the first attack on these youth that are now trying to be part of the Palestinian community. And
so basically what you are saying, that Israel has not managed to destroy the Palestinian identity inside the borders of Israel.
You want the sad truth? It has. It significantly has. Because in 2000, you know, following the second intifada, there was a very, very clear understanding that the youth here, if they are to be exposed to or engaging with their Palestinianness, there's a direct threat internally. You know, we're considered by Israeli politicians across the board as the 5th column of this. We're 20% of the citizenry, by the way.
Demographic tickling bomb.
A demographic bomb, you know, and so there's this constant, you know, making us out to be the enemy of the state, right? Constantly. This is part of Israeli political discourse across the board. And so there was this immediate, there's this urgency to how do we confront this? And for the last 20 years, the answer has been to allow for a flourishing culture of crime. And so since 2000 up until today, it began with the pouring of drugs and guns into our community, and the complete lawlessness in these Arab towns, in which the police is not really interested in mitigating civil issues, but they're only interested in arresting activists and people that come out and organize protests and so on and so forth. And what we've seen over the last 20 years is this development of a new social construct, which is organized crime. And so in the wake of failed political parties, and in the wake of the fragmentation of the nucleus of the family, and in light of this disparities in opportunity, right? So when we talk about defunded schools, we're talking about more than 60% of our young men don't finish high school. And we're talking about other laws that give prevalence to members of the IDF to find jobs. And we're talking about laws that, you know, back to urban, there's another law, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping around, but there's another law introduced, you know, about the committee law. And so if I want to buy an apartment, if I want to leave Kalansawa and I want to buy an apartment in the next settlement next to Kalansawa, again, built on my land, I would have to apply. And then there's a committee that reviews my applications to check if I fit the character of the community, which I don't. Right? So it's all these like subtleties of racism, but this is enshrined by law, right? But to go back to explaining this crime culture, which has become really like the virus or a cancer in our community, it came about within these environments, right? The ghettoization of our urban places, the lack of opportunities for our youth, the lack of social, political settings to kind of you know, create popular education or political education or even civil education. And in the suspended spaces where the police is completely uninterested in regulating social affairs, organized criminal syndicates were birthed, basically. And there has been, over the last at least 3 years, numerous reports, because this is not conspiracy, and numerous reports by the parliament, the Knesset itself, by the police commissioners, by all kinds of independent investigators, that the ones who actually created this are the Shabak, the Israeli intelligence agency. And this is not some kind of conspiracy or being thrown out. Just the commissioner himself, the police commissioner, before October 7th, came out in a press conference and basically told the media outlets, you ask us to combat crime in the Arab community, but we can't do that because each person we arrest is taken out by the Shabak 3 days later, right? And you know, we're talking about this, when we talk about the outpouring of guns, also an independent investigation by the Knesset did this survey, and they surveyed that there's more than 600,000 pieces of illegal weaponry in the Palestinian communities in 48. Now what's really striking is that one third of these guns that have been caught before. The serial numbers on these guns have already been caught by the police once and then found again on the street, you know? And so even members of not just the Likud, but members of Jewish Power, I think the, you know, the one with Ben Gvir, I don't know how it translates into English. Yeah, the Jewish Power, something like this. He came out in interviews and he said that big members, like moving members of these criminal syndicates, are actually high-ranking Shabak agents. And the Shabak also came out last year. Shabak is the intelligence agency. They came out and they were asked to stop, and they said, we cannot jeopardize our operations. Now, I don't know if this needs further explanation, but you know, I'll leave the door open for you to go and research if interested. Now, the reason why I mention all of this is to highlight the fact that no, we have an entire younger generation of Palestinians who have completely been purposefully existing in a space created for them to completely, you know, not be a part of any national discourse, any liberatory discourse, any emancipatory discourse, and to be super consumed only with these internal strifes and how you can make money. Now, to understand this phenomenon of organized crime, like I'll just give you a few numbers, right? Last year, we're talking about more than 220 Palestinians in the West Bank that were extrajudicially assassinated by the Israeli military, right? This, you know, figures. But you also have 200 plus Palestinian citizens within 48 that have been murdered. Arab on Arab crime, right? We're talking Palestinians killing other Palestinians, almost at the same level that the IDF has been taking out Palestinians in the West Bank. I mean, and these figures are, when we look at them and we frame them within this context, within the colonial occupation, ethnic cleansing, and everything else we've spoken about, they project a very ugly image, right? A very ugly image of how this community exists today. I mean, since October 7th until today, as the world is completely, you know, in Gazi and in you know, the West Bank and so on and so forth, 110 homicides have occurred. This comes to show you how completely fragmented we are in our psychological collective imagination of who we are, right? And to understand further this phenomena, we also situated not only in the lack of opportunity provided by the state, but also the fact that 50% of our population lives under the poverty line, officially. Which means that if you want to search for livelihood, obviously you don't get the same opportunities and jobs, and you don't have enough education to get the higher paying jobs. So when you go to the bank, for instance, to take a loan to build your house or to do, you know, what you need to set yourself up, you can't because you don't have collateral. And so you end up going to these criminals and taking money as dark loans, right? And we're talking about, you know, when you can't repay, they take you out. And from the 200, we're talking, you know, I think 12 prosecutions. We're talking that of the 200 people killed, the police has nothing to show. You know, and they use this argument that the Arab community doesn't work with us, which is complete bollocks, because they are part of the system. I've personally been attacked, but it's a story for a different setting. And so I say all of this just to show, and I maybe end with, in 2021, when there was the uprising, we saw this new refreshed breath by young people in 48, young men and women, who came out to show active solidarity with what was happening in Jerusalem and what was happening in the West Bank. But to make a point, they arrested 900 of them, and they put such a high bail, and they gave them such punitive measures so that they can show, do not get engaged in this. You know, stay busy doing your criminal. Stay busy in that survival mode, which is, as I've said, we've been the same since 1948, but now it's taking this shape of a vicious crime culture.
Thank you for this. Now, again, many questions, but I will move to what is the most pressing one, let's say. So, we could talk a lot about the political processes. As you said, it's on one side, it's very clear, but there are many chapters in this story. So after '93, there was a story how with the Oslo process, the Palestinians will get their own state. It was called the so-called two-state solution. The Palestinian Authority was established actually in a minor area, so the West Bank, when they have the power, which has to a large degree turned into a tool of Israeli occupation. In fact, the two-state solution is basically everything but dead to a large degree, because the ruling Israeli politicians never meant to allow it. I mean, the Benjamin Netanyahu was the first one who said many times, I will never allow the Palestinian state. Then now, even for the last couple of years, it's liberal international organizations, so the Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, there are other ones who basically said there is an elaborate system of apartheid in Israel. And then we had, for the last couple of years, started also with the, to a large degree by the Trump administration, I mean the so-called Abraham Accords, where Israel would normalize its ties to the Arab world and will even get it on a kind of alliance with Saudi Arabia. And and the decades-old demand from officially from the Arab side, I mean the Arab countries, was that, well, there has to be something significantly moved on the Palestinian issue, but it didn't happen, and basically what they were doing for the last couple of years is basically to build to create the new Middle East where the Palestinians would be completely thrown under the table and forgotten. Now, when I read the explanations, some of them, there are various interpretations about the reasons and motives for the Hamas attack of 2nd October. One of them is that the idea was to massively shake this idea that it is possible to have a peace in the Middle East and to have also the security for Israelis and to, well, build a prosperous and peaceful environment without solving the Palestinian issue. So now, and this has certainly been, this vision has been certainly destroyed in a massive sense by the events since in the last 6 months. So we said there was the two-state project. There is now this massive killing campaign going on in Gaza. In your opinion, if, well, I know it's a very tough question, but if you can give us some answer, to which degree is this, let's say, a fundamental rupture in the history of Palestinian struggle? And what would be, when we were talking yesterday, you said like there is no really convincing Palestinian project at this moment. It has to be reinvented. So these two questions.
Okay, so just to give a foundational framework, it's very important to understand what Oslo was about. Oslo highlighted a very significant shift in the trajectory of the Palestinian struggle, in which beforehand we see that the very language, the discourse that was being spoken on in terms of socially amongst communities was that of liberation, emancipation. How do we liberate Palestine from a foreign entity that has come and dispossessed us and exiled us and so on and so forth. But what Oslo did was change course into a language of state building, right? Suddenly it was about establishing a Palestinian state, right? It was about giving an entity to one political category of the Palestinians in an attempt to kind of liquidate this wider project of liberation. And to a very high degree that has succeeded. Yes, I mean, not only today, not only in the last 20 years, but since Oslo itself, the Israeli counterpart never really committed to the two-state solution. It asked the PLO to recognize them, which they did, and Israel recognized the PLO. It didn't recognize the Palestinian state. And it's very interesting also to note that in '93, when there was, I think, 70,000 settlers in the West Bank, well, today we're talking about 900,000+, almost 1 million, right? The two-state, and you look at the rhetoric, and the very, very real rhetoric, right? Realpolitik, this isn't like some kind of speculation. This is what's on the ground. Israel has been very, very honest about its expansionist project, about annexation of the West Bank, about, you know, and it's not just what Netanyahu says publicly. It's how that is put into practice via policy and legislation, etc. And so, yes, the two-state solution is and always has been a hoax. It's a body. It's as has been described by many as a dead body in a morgue that is just pulled out when convenient for a distraction. And we see that the continuation of this, because you mentioned the Trump deal of the century that was, and it was also significant because we see that the language spoken of here again was that of economic rights, not self-determination. Take more economic prosperity, but don't trouble us with this self-determination talk. You know, we'll give you an airport, we'll give you a port, we'll give you more economic leniency, we'll give you promising kind of collaborations with our new friends in the Gulf, but don't talk about Palestinian statehood, really. And it was rejected by even the PA, right? And by the way, now part of the Trump deal was for the first time the area I'm from was mentioned in the Trump deal. For the first time internationally,
Landswaps, if I'm right,
the triangle, the area I'm from, will be, you know, will be stripped of our citizenship. So you have 300,000 less Palestinians with rights, and they become stateless. But to go back, this policy of economic freedoms is very important to understand, and it has roots not just in 2020, but we can see right after the second intifada. Right after the whole Hamas elections, and when Hamas was disbanded to Gazi, there was an era that was ushered in that we Palestinians called Fayyadism. There was a minister called Fayyad, and he basically opened the market for privatization. And suddenly you see all these brick franchises opening up in a colonized, in an occupied, militarily occupied region. So we're talking about, you know, franchises like KFC, or you know, Domino's, and all these big kinds of corporations. Suddenly there's banks giving loans to Palestinians. Suddenly there's a surge in buildings and new cars and just this consumer culture, so as to kind of distract people from talking about their political rights, which is not very unsimilar to what was happening in '48, where I'm from, right? Now, I say all of this to answer your second question. Indeed, we are at a very, very, very significant moment in history, sincerely, right? We talk about the Trump being, you know, the deal of the century being a remapping of the area. I think what Israel is doing currently is a remapping, it's using this opportunity, or looking at it as an opportunity to further continue its expansionist project. When we talk about Gaza, they're talking about ethnically cleansing it. They're talking about completely destroying it to the ground. And you have all these groups, political groups, talking about repopulating Gaza soon, right? Part of the Trump deal also includes, you know, agreements about oil and energy. We're talking about the UAE and Saudi Arabia that want to now stretch pipelines of gas and oil through the Naqab Desert, to making Israel basically a major distributor of energy in the region, in the backdrop of the Russian-Ukraine energy crisis, right? And so we're seeing all of these kinds of things coming together to further strengthen the existence of the state of Israel in the region, if not give it even more prevalence. And, you know, also they haven't shied away historically from using expansionist language, not only for the West Bank, for the region as a whole. You know, there's a large population in Israeli society that does believe that, you know, first of all, it has the right to both sides of the West, you know, of the bank, right? So both East and West, and that they have a right to Sinai, and they have a right to even parts of Syria and Iraq. And this is not hidden, this is not speculation as well. It might be spoken as rhetoric, but this is, you know, really like the essence of the project. Now, I say, the reason why I say, and I'm happy that you said that this is a significant historic moment, is because I also find an optimism in this moment. But I think that we should be daring, particularly in the global south, in the working class, to step up and to be able to imagine new horizons of what political life looks like. Because part of the threat, and remember earlier I talked about the legitimization of this discourse, if we stay quiet, this is a signaling to them, to the powers that be, that we're okay with this. But the ripple effect and the reverberations of what is happening, the complete disregard for international law, the complete disregard for all of the social movements happening, and you look at, you know, even like student movements, and like you're being completely demonized. This should be a signal to people here that this threat is real, and this, you know, this can be at your doorsteps in many different shapes and forms. And so it is a moment to step up. And it is a moment to be able to say, well, you know what, this modern conception or this modern reality of the nation state, as per this Eurocentric model of governmentality and of rights, etc., has been important. It's part of the legacy of colonialism in the region. Only 80 years ago, this was not a reality. not just in Palestine, but all of the global South. We're talking about these structures are relatively new in history. This is just a blimp, you know? And so this only pushes us to a place to think, or at least in my imagination, it looks like this. If it's coming, if this threat is coming, which I believe it is, we have the option of either passively becoming or passively taken by its policies to a very dangerous place. And this is, you know, we look at the rise of the right wing and conservative governments and racist governments and neo-fascists. This is, you know, this is very evident in the global arena. And so we either have a chance, we either sit there passively and wait for things to occur, or we take this moment, we step up, and we have a daring breath to say, no, we want to live otherwise. You know, because if we're, at least for Palestinians, if we're gonna go, we might as well go swinging mentally, right? And so it's true, I was a big advocate for the two states, for the one-state solution, right?
One state is the idea of having a common state of all the people living together from the river Jordan to the sea, in which everybody would be equal regardless of his religion or ethnic belonging.
Yes, a constitutional democracy that is not based on any ethnic or nationalist backgrounds, one that also not only grants individual freedoms, but collective rights. And to be, you know, but I've done away with this idea, or I've moved forward, because I don't think, you know, I don't think there's space anymore in the world for this notion of, you know, nation states, because it's done nothing but, at least in our area, exploit our resources and further entrench oppression in the very basic factors of our life. And so, you know, I say something and you know, you say it's you know, overly ambitious or kind of in the realm of fantasy. But I think it is high time. It is high time that we believe in our imaginations and have a daring approach to saying, wait, we want to have agency over how we want to run our political life, our polity. What does governmentality look anew? What is, you know, when we talk about establishing a new society, what does that look in terms of its infrastructure that goes on? And so, you know, I don't talk about the river to the sea anymore. I talk about Mashriq and Maghrib, because I'm also, you know, when we say Middle East, it's like middle of what and east to who, right? And so I envision a geopolitical entity or establishment on all of this region that operates as a model for what, you know, just societies can look like. One where it's not a one size that fits all, one that there's collective protection of collective groups, not only Jewish, but Amazigh, Sharkas, Druze, everyone, and is able to grant them a life that has prosperity and dignity. And so I believe that the liberation of Palestine, the liberation of the Palestinian person, is part and parcel of the liberation of the region from the legacy not only of colonialism, but the current very successful model of dictatorships, you know? And so, I think I might, you know, this might be completely out of the box for a lot of realpolitik thinkers, right? But I think, you know, we should at least have the power to imagine it, have the power to speak on it, have the power to reflect, and just open up the space to what radical imagination looks like for a new collective human project, if I may, you know, without, yeah.
As Ivica mentioned before, I was doing some work also with the Kurdish organizations in the Middle East, especially the Workers' Party of Kurdistan and the PKK and the affiliated organizations, who have also developed a similar model. I mean, in some broad ways, how to do away with the nation state as the model which is basically imported and imposed on the Middle East and on the area which it does not correspond. And I mean, even the areas where it has established itself in Europe, in the West, it has often been, as we know, implemented with massive crimes, the ethnic cleansing, genocides, the homogenization of the population. Just in Europe, it was done in previous centuries. But now, so I have two questions. The first one is, and then we may maybe open the floor to the public. What would be the strategy, in your opinion, how to contribute to it? And now in two ways. First is internally, from the Palestinians as the repressed population. Now, when we spoke yesterday, if I'm right, you said you think the only thing which can really change the situation is the massive non-violent resistance in the West Bank. We have seen historically that every basically effort of violent resistance has been met by a brutal, disproportionately many times more brutal answer from the Israeli state. And we have here also the fact that now, okay, maybe you can say it's from your position, but still, I think it deserves to be said. Of course, the events in Gaza didn't start on October the 6th. And we saw here in the movie the quotes from Moshe Dayan, the Israeli chief of staff, of general staff in the 50s, and later the minister of defense, one of the most significant figures in Israeli history, who said that Palestine doesn't exist. And there was also his famous speech in, I think, in '96, when he basically showed to his soldiers Gaza and said, there the people hate us. I'm paraphrasing, but more or less is that, with very good reasons, because we took their land, and in front of their eyes, we are basically turning their land into our land. We expelled them, we took their gardens, their property, and everything. So, of course, this has a very long and brutal history of injustice, and it is impossible to look at anything what happened, including Hamas as a social phenomena, taking it out of the context. But still, the violence, we have to find a way to get out of this circle of violence, and also the historical experience shows that it leads only to a more destruction, to more humiliation, to more death, and deeper and deeper into the abyss. So from this point of view, I have to say, of course, there is a right for a struggle for liberation, but all the crimes need to be condemned, be the crimes of the systematic crimes of Israeli state or of Hamas. We can also mention that some of the leading Palestinian intellectuals, as Edward Said, was speaking in very bad terms about Hamas. But now, so my first thing would be, how do you envision the internal strategy, because it's the Palestinians who are, and we see that they are more and more, let's say, taking agency in their hands. We see how even the discourse in the United States is slowly changing compared to what was maybe 20 or 30 years ago, when it was complete unreserved support for Israel. Now we see even in liberal Jewish communities in the United States how there are more and more Jews who are basically protesting the Israeli killings, apartheid, and the system of injustice. And so the first, what would be your internal, how do you see the internal strategy? And second, how we, I mean the people from outside, people on the international solidarity movement for Palestine can contribute?
Okay, so I'll attempt to answer as cohesively and comprehensively as possible. First of all, let it be known, when it comes to the Palestinian state or the Palestinian identity, yes, you see that it's very invoked all of the time. But hey, you know, Moshe Dayan, Palestine doesn't exist. Well, guess what? Algeria didn't exist. Mozambique didn't exist. You know, many of these places around the world, the states did not exist. And I say this, you know, many times. My grandfather did not need a Palestinian flag to know he's Palestinian, right? He didn't. This character, which is considered a reaction to the Israeli state, is not what defines my existence or my reality, you know. And you know, you hear these absurd things, oh, but the letter B is not, you know, I don't know if you've heard, but one minister came out, is like, but of course Palestine doesn't exist because the Palestinians can't even pronounce the letter P, right? And it's like, yeah, you don't engage in these, but it brings us to the very important thing, and this is where I attempt to answer the first question. It is true, as I've said, the entire engineering of social life, of the collective political imagination of Palestinians has been hijacked by a discourse of economics, of a discourse of these comforts that are very similar to this that we see in Europe and we see around the world. You know, you have something to lose, you're comfortable in your space. And here I'm talking about the West Bank, in very particular areas of the West Bank, very particular areas in 48. And Gaza is its own thing. I don't even think I'm capable of speaking on Gaza, you know. But I think
when we speak about this idea of economic development, I would just mention one very grotesque thing. A couple of weeks ago, there was Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and one of his persons in charge of the Middle East. He was basically saying, yeah, we could develop really nice real estate on the Gaza coast, like it would be very profitable. So it was this frame of mind. That's what he sees.
And this is what he tries to translate on those of us that are weak and vulnerable enough to accept it. And the reason why I say, you know, the reason why I say those of us and that we exist in this place, because yes, over the last 30 years, when we consider the fact that both in 48, but also in West Bank, there has been zero work on any kind of political education, on any kind of conceptualization of a project, a Palestinian project that can guide communities. And all of this discussion and discourse happens in these little echelons that are proxies basically for bigger forces. And so I think that yes, the first step is, you know, we can't really ask for your solidarity on a very fundamental level if we don't have a project to present to you. You know, there is, you know, movements like the BDS campaign, but then the Palestinian leadership does not endorse the BDS campaign. Then you have the Sulta, the PA, that talk about two-state on the borders of the West Bank, and then, you know, so there is no real unified, and this is dangerous, and this is on us to order our house. And I think to do so, there needs to be grassroots work with the communities that breaks these very like floating concepts of apartheid or colonialism, this academic discourse, and actually works with people on their very basic needs and is able to describe to them their political reality through it and to show them how agency looks like, what it means to take ownership over your day-to-day lives. And so I think the first step is, yes, just like in the first intifada that we see the grassroots work that was done in Palestinian communities, with children, with the youth, with the senior citizens, etc. And this kind of work is very important to be able to establish a value-based system that synchronizes the Palestinian person. And it is only under this kind of work that we will be able to address our humane values. What kind of humane project do we want? One that breaks this dichotomy of, you know, who pushed the Jews to the sea, right? But one that is able to present a higher kind of, conception of what living in this area looks like and how we can take agency over creating this new character of Palestinian, one that embodies values and speak to tomorrow, and speak to the future, and don't just build on the nostalgia of what Palestine used to be in 48 or what Palestine was before 93, but one that is proactively thinking of a future in which we have agency and ownership. Now, when it comes to resistance, let's also put this whole, you know, yes, it's in Arabic we have a word, mustanza, which is like, it's bled out this whole, you know, this whole argument about our right to resist. But we do have a right to resist, natural right to resist. Whether international law agrees with it or endorses it, or that's beyond the point. But to make that more real to you, we cannot exist without resisting.
this is not an option for us. When we look at, just the West Bank, what's been occurring, we're talking about daily attacks by a society that wants to take you over. We're talking about a military that is constantly targeting you. And in these things, we don't have, we don't have the luxury of choosing to resist or not. We have to resist to be in this place. We have to. We resist on all these levels. This man that is buying the refrigerator, he's resisting. He wants, like it's the symbology of a refrigerator is very, it's very, substantive. Because yes, we don't have the privilege of wanting to resist or not. And even by endorsing this discourse of economic rights, we are also we're playing a political game as well. And so yes, there needs to be internal work within the Palestinian community on imagining and being able to collectively envision what our life and society looks like. Now, on the other front, which is the next level that you mentioned, I think there's many things to be done. First of all, don't stop talking about this. This is occurring. And perhaps I'm quite certain there's a massacre that took place just within the framework, not of the whole night, but just the conversation we're having. And so it's important that...
The most pressing thing would be to press for the ceasefire.
To press, yes, ceasefire, truce, but yes, let's find ways to end the human annihilation and extermination of a civilian population now, right? And let's not become desensitized to this content that we're coming out. Mind you, we have to also think that this is only but a fraction of what's going on. This is what cameras caught. There's so many other things that cameras didn't catch, right? And daily we're seeing this, daily, and they want you to think that you don't have power to do anything about it. Just like in 48, they've convinced us that we're fragile and we're weak, but you're not. Your voice is very important. There are so many ways to do this. So the first thing is, yes, don't stop, continue. This here, I am so grateful to be given, to be open, to be given the platform, to be able to speak to you, because this is very significant. Palestinians don't have platforms. Not myself, but you look at the global media, where do you hear Palestinian voices? Only when they want to be tokenized, or only when they want it to be attacked. And so we have to also consider this. How can we also be voices, or how can we open up our platforms to these voices to continue, just at least the verbalization of what's going on, because there is power to that. And it's beyond symbology, right? There are very, very, very practical things in which solidarity looks like. When we talk arms embargo, how can we influence our policymakers to end their weapons, just stop the weapons? When we talk about all these institutions, boycott. There's these corporations that come out and audaciously brag about being being friendly to the IDF. They're right around your corners. We're talking about McDonald's, and we're talking about all these that are blatantly and openly, and you have the choice within your comfort zone. You're not you're not doing anything outside of your comfort zone. You're still able to get coffee or a hamburger from across the street. This is very significant. Starbucks has lost billions in the last, a crazy amount, and so this is another kind of layer. When we talk about solidarity, we also talk about we're talking about how can you organize within your given capacities. Psychiatrists, how can psychiatrists form collective, nurses and doctors? How can, there's all these practical things to be considered, to be done consistently, and the least thing we can do is just continue talking about it, right? But yeah, the idea is don't stop, because we need this voice, we really do, but also be wary of not turning it into the thing itself, right? So for example, what happened in Venice Biennale, or what's happening in Columbia University is very significant. But that's not the incident. That's not the case. The case is it should continue to project the attention towards Gazi, right? And so also let's be very careful when we do these acts of solidarity. But yes, there's multiple ways to do it, And you know, the Palestinian population, alhamdulillah, we are a population of dignity, and we don't need people's pity, right? But yes, the economic situation in Gaza is horrible, it's horrendous. You know, so yes, things like donations and funding, things like those are very important. Things like also continuing to be in touch and in constant communication with organizations on the field. You know, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank. What does it mean for a place like this one to open new forms of communication with cultural institutions in Palestine? And to see how there can be a new synchronicity in the way we work and in the way we, you know, there might be perhaps even more direct examples of how to be in solidarity. So yes, there's an array of different things to consider, which are beyond just symbolic. I've also it's important to mention that I've also, so my father is from the Triangle, my mother is actually from the West Bank, and I was born and raised for a certain time in East Jerusalem, so I had this early on kind of nuanced experience to all these categorizations of oppression. But I guess to answer your question, really, I am someone, I've always felt the need to be free. And I always felt like there's this inherent kind of anger and rage I had toward injustice, just intuitively, right? Innately to myself on a primordial kind of level, I just hate oppression. And I didn't know how to frame it for a very long time in my life. I mean, I did grow up in an environment that is governed by criminality, right? Governed, you know, the first time I ever really understood Nakba, I was 16 or 17 years old. You know, I do come from that background, but I think I've just, you know, humbly speaking, I want to live free in my head, you know, and I don't want to feel like I am living some kind of life that is a life that is devoid of, you know, basic values like dignity and respect, self-respect, you know, and to be exposed to injustice, just like we've seen in the last film at least, in which, you know, your basic human personhood is being stripped from you. And I think I can't tolerate that on a personal level. And so I've tried many different mediums to be able to get to this. And as a matter of fact, I only see myself as a messenger with a message, you know. So I realize that I'm able to relay this, and I do. But inherently, I just want to be free. That's it. Like, I just want to be able to live a day-to-day life in which I am in charge of myself, in which I am not violated, right? And just to answer on a theoretical level about the rest of the world, yes, I do, you know, I've always felt disconnected from the rest of my kinship, right? From Iraqis and Lebanese and Libyans and Moroccans, you know, there seem to be this unnatural divide. You know, we're constantly, the political ceiling for Palestinians in 48 has always, you know, radically been minority rights. How can we achieve minority rights? But then one day it kind of hit me. It's like, how am I a minority when there's 300 million Arabs around me? I'm not a minority, I'm home. And so this idea of like being able to see the same oppression just in different faces across the region, which kills the potential of an entire nation, just like it kills the potential of an individual. And I really believe that they're like-minded people with like-minded approach to how they would like to live life, and those are people that I want to be able to engage with and work collectively. It's looking bad. It's looking really bad, especially for this generation that's coming right now. We're seeing the internalization of this criminal demeanor, of this like gangster kind of identity, and we're seeing this also amplification of an ideology or a culture of now mini gangs or micro gangs, and how, you know, they move together. But it's because of a lack of political work. Now, when it comes to terminology, as I've said, we refuse the term Arab Israeli or Israeli Arab. You know, we pushed for a long time to be considered, you know, there's multiple Palestinians within 48, Palestinian citizens of Israel, Arab 48, but now among certain circles in my life, we're pushing for a new term, which is heartland Palestinians, right? So we are in the heartland, and I don't mean to be very dark about this, but yeah, it's looking bad. It's looking really bad, and it will require a lot of work. And if you, I don't know if you noticed, but even in like, for example, VIDA, the spokesperson for Al-Qassam, he had a speech today, and for the last 200 days, there's been no mention of us. Notice, like he asked for people in the West Bank to come out for an uprising. He urges those in Jordan, but he doesn't mention us because, and that kind of adds to a certain, I want to say heartbreak, but it's because it's very clear that we're completely fragmented and we're complete, like and I hope that we're not seen as a lost cause, right? But the truth is, we have the ace. We really do, you know, we have that joker card. Like we are within the system. And again, you know, I'm not an advocate for chaos. I think chaos is the easiest thing to be done. I can cause chaos right now as I enter or exit this building. I can burn a few tires and create a rupture. I am with thinking of a new tomorrow. And so when I do talk about, you know, an uprising and things like this, you know, we don't need armed violence, mind you. The Palestinian cause does not require armed resistance. We have the right to it, yes, in the West Bank and Gazi, but it's not required. It really isn't. But it requires synchronicity and organization. And it requires a deeper understanding of our day-to-day struggles. And so I say this to say that when we talk about the weight or the role that Palestinians in 48 play, yes, it's very varied. You know, we can, you know, just the basic fact of blocking a street and disrupting the normalcy of everyday life is a very, very strong indicator, right? But it's not looking good. But it's also not looking good because there's a targeted attack on us. So all of our political organizers, I mean, professors are being arrested. Professors, right? Professors that have professorship degrees in the Hebrew University. And so it's signaling a lot of fear. And mind you, we don't have structures to protect us. We really don't. We live in a population, Israeli population is highly, not only militarily trained, but armed. You know, and will be protected by the police and the military if need be. And so we do exist in a very precarious situation where even the strongest, most radical voices in 48 or in Heartland are afraid, you know, and I don't know what breaks that paradigm, and I don't have an answer to that. Unfortunately, I really don't.
Would you say, like, what's the most opinion like? What is the share of the people who go for the strategy, okay, let's integrate, or is the majority maybe just, you know, feels rejected and is basically disorientated, or how would you estimate it?
Yeah, as I said, there's a very failed political environment in 48 in Heartland. It's almost non-existent.
There are political parties in Israel, you said they achieved nothing.
They not only achieved nothing, they're really not part of, they're not part of the grassroots, they're really not there. And they don't have any kind of political discourse that sound like, that makes any sense. You don't understand what they want, you know, because they still exist within the framework of the Knesset, of democratic elections, of being part of the parliament and so on. But in the shadows of that, there's nothing. And that is the sad reality. That is the hard truth. And no, you know, decades of Israelization, decades of complete erasure of any work on Palestinian identity, decades of targeting cultural institutions have resulted in a population that it doesn't have a critical reflection of its role, and that's why you see, you know, this consumerist lifestyle prevailing, right? This criminal culture prevailing, because there is no, you know, but the strongest, I would say, perhaps, but this opens up a longer discussion also related to Oslo, is, I think, the Islamic one. Because Islam came, you know, following the fall of the USSR, which was a big kind of like, not only ideological kind of umbrella to PLO, but also like a support, you know, with resources and what. And when socialism kind of, as a political project, fell apart, and when the PA came to be birthed as, you know, a military proxy, a lot of people, you know, found refuge in Islam as a value-based system. And but what is very important to note about political Islam in 48 in Heartland, first of all, it's divided. There's the southern branch and the northern branch. The southern branch is like, they're house slaves in the Malcolm X type, you know, analogy. You know, because the leader, Mansour Abbas, was part of the coalition of the government that, you know, bombed Ram, yeah. Party. And the northern branch is outlawed, is criminalized. But the major essence of both in terms of their political ideology is Judgment Day. You know, so you do your ritual Islam. It's your safety zone. You come back. It's the only thing that can describe your oppression and give meaning to this life. But it doesn't provide a political project. The political project is, you know, the end of days, and, you know, God will judge everyone. You know, and so it's a comfortable place to revert back to, but it's also very incoherent as a political project, I might add. You know, but also there needs to be known that Islam as a social vessel is also not that strong in 48. And so yes, you do have like the Islamic character, but many people are capitalist in their very basic values, right? So you do have the sect of political Islam, which is apolitical, right? So they don't talk about prisoners, they don't talk about land grabs, they don't talk about any of this. They talk about Aqsa Mosque, for sure. So it's an apolitical project, but other than that, we don't really have something that's substantial.
And my longer question, then maybe we open the floor once more to the public and then we slowly close. So where are we related? I'm not sure. Can we smoke here?
No, not exactly.
Yeah, I think maybe we get.
That's anti-Semitic.
Maybe we get showered.
I'm a Semite.
Exactly.
So speaking about political projects, and before we said that the idea to do away with the nation state is, at least from this point of view where we are here, looks kind of, well, maybe it takes not that much imagination, but it will not be easy to put it into the practice. Let's say it's far from the current realities. So I would ask a question which you may say that makes me even more utopistic, but from my perspective as an observer, I think it's maybe the only way to progress. So, moving away from the Israeli state and from that layer of oppression and everything, and coming to, let's say, to Israeli population, do you think, and in which way, is it possible at all to reach out to them? I know, especially after the latest war, that the current war, that all the polls show that, I don't know, a huge percentage of them doesn't want to have anything with anymore with the Palestinians, complete separation, expel them, etc., etc. There are some intellectuals in the public who are a minority, big minority, but who have different opinions. Even when I was writing and researching about the current events, there was a guy who was Israeli negotiator at Taba and Camp David protest who said, yeah, okay, so this is not a do away with the nation state, this is a short-term solution. Said, yeah, we need to reconstitute PA and Hamas has to take part. Of course, Hamas is an actor. We may think whatever we want, but it is an actor on the ground, and we have to talk with these people because there is no way out. And so before the attack, before the latest, the war started, there was, I think according to the research, I have here the number, so the full third of the young Jews in the US thought that the behavior of the Israeli state towards the Palestinians is racist. And 38% of those younger than 40 years thought that Israel is an apartheid state. So I think that to achieve a real change, to dismantle this apartheid system of oppression, from one side the international pressure is really important, but from the other side we need to have a project which can gain some allies in Israeli society, however utopistic it may sound, but I think it's only the common struggle for, let's say, common future society can move out of this deadlock, of this circle of violence. Would you say it's, in your opinion, completely dead hope, or?
I think Hassan Kanafani said it best. Late Palestinian intellectual. He said, how do you expect the neck to have a conversation with the sword? What kind of talk can the neck have with the sword? And I mentioned this to say that I can only be able to talk about naturalization of the Israeli, not the Jewish, when I'm free. I can't talk on it now. But what I can tell you from someone that's lived inside of Israel, it's not, the coexistence is not the problem. It really isn't. On human relations, in shared interests in life, that's not the problem. We can only begin talking about this when there's a shift in the power structure, when there's a shift in the power dynamic. I can't negotiate with someone or with an entity that still has full control over my life. Now, it is true that all these movements around the world for the solidarity, campaign are pressuring Israel, but any real change will come from outside. As Palestinians, yes, we do have the obligation of imagining and proposing a project, a humane project, for the next day, for post-liberation. And that is very generous of us, I would say, humanely, because how can you expect someone whose neck is being stepped on to be like, okay, I'll be the bigger guy and give you a solution. But yes, we should, as Palestinians, elevate in our next steps in imagining something that is humane for everyone. But that can only happen when I'm free, and to be free, there needs to be a shift in the power dynamic that pressures the current political establishment to be dismantled. And I cannot have a conversation about the day after when someone enjoys rights that I don't enjoy, or someone is granted rights and granted privileges that aren't granted to me. How do you expect them to just give up their privilege? No one would do that, especially no one that has been prevented from thinking critically about their existence, because the minute you're able to touch that really deep part that they know is wrong, then the whole conception is crumbled to them. Like right now, it's not, when you look at all these protests, it's about the government. It's not the government. 93% surveyed want the war to continue in Gazi. So it's only a shift in the power dynamic. Only when rights are equalized will I be able to answer such a question. But from experience and from what I know, coexistence is not the problem. living a humane life together is not the problem. And yes, we as Palestinians need to envision a project that also we take agency over what transitional justice looks like and what needs to occur for people to be, people and systems to be held accountable for their crimes, and for, you know, for what, what's the word, you know, you have entire 9 million refugees around the world, what kind of retribution? And so yes, we can propose this, but this will only happen if there's a shift in dynamic, power dynamic. But I can't speak to my oppressor, not because I'm not human, because I'm unable to. Because speaking to them, what, am I going to beg them to give up their privilege and be friends? It's not real, it doesn't make sense, you know? I hope that answers the question.
Just thank you everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.